Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. This is Rob Love with Love & Company, and thanks for your patience the last couple of minutes. It turned out that the GoToWebinar wasn't functioning quite correctly, and you weren't seeing what we were doing. So quick restart, and it looks like everything is good now. So welcome. We're pleased that you've joined us this afternoon. Our game plan, we will start with a few logistics, make sure everybody understands if you want to have a dialogue or pose questions or things, how to do that. And then we're going to run through a series of topics centered around continuing care at home and what are some of the challenges and dynamics that are happening in the marketplace today, both from operational perspectives and from sales and marketing. And we understand we have quite a number of people on the call today who are with organizations that do not yet have a continuing care at home program. And so we'll be wrapping up with an overview of what the process of planning and launching one looks like. That's kind of a game plan here. And then at the end, we'll have a period of time for Q&A. So on the logistics side, each of you should have a GoToWebinar kind of dialogue control panel associated with this. It looks something like what we have on the screen. And within that, if you see at the bottom where it says type question here, let me say one thing again. I think everybody knows this, but audio on the webinar is one way. You will be able to hear us, but we will not be able to take any voice questions. What we're going to do is go through the webinar, and you can ask questions all along the way via the application, GoToWebinar application, and then we will draw from those questions at the end and answer them then. So to ask the question, you click on the little triangle on your control panel that shows questions. You'll see a space below where you are able to type the question in, then click send down in the lower right-hand corner, and it will send us the question. So that's how that is going to work today. I'm really pleased to have AV Powell join us today, along with Sarah Montalto from Love & Company. And I'm going to pause 1 second here. If you give me a couple of seconds, I'm just going to go on mute for a second. All right, the technical difficulty is extended from Frederick, Maryland to Atlanta, and AV's having to reboot his system and come back up. So we're going to do the introductions in a slightly different order, and we'll come back to AV when he's live. Sarah, would you like to lead off for us?
Sure. My name is Sarah Montalto. I'm the VP of Strategic Insight at Love & Company. I've been working in the senior living industry for the past 16 years, both on the market intelligence, market research side, along with the marketing side of the industry. My entire career really has been working primarily with life plan communities, with some assisted living and memory care communities sprinkled in, and a few continuing care at home programs as well.
Thank you, Sarah. I am Rob Love. I'm the owner of Love & Company. Been working in the field for slightly longer than Sarah, more than 25 years now. And my major focus these days is working with organizations to plan for the future and look at new revenue opportunities, revenue sources, and ways to grow beyond the typical life plan community service areas that have been offered in the past. So that's the reason that continuing care at home has been a particular interest of mine the last few years, as many of our clients have been exploring that. I'm going to go ahead and introduce AV for you, for him right now. When he joins, hopefully soon, you'll be able to hear from him directly. But we've had the pleasure of working with AV for probably well over 10 years now in a variety of pricing studies in the analytical areas, helping clients improve margins. And each of us has had a particular interest in the continuing care at home field and have kind of come together the last several years to combine resources and see what we can do there. AV, of course, has a very long history in the actuarial side of the lifeline community field, and really was instrumental in developing a number of the principles that are used to evaluate metrics of continuing care retirement communities, lifeline communities today. So the question becomes, why are we doing this today? Why are we focusing on continuing care at home? Why do we feel that this has become a significant enough topic to reach beyond a few, in the scheme of things, lifeline community providers, and to a broader market and make more organizations aware of the potential, but also the challenges associated with the field? When we look at the field today, there were 31 operating programs as of the end of June of this year, spread all across the U.S., but primarily concentrated on the eastern half. But when we look at those 31 in a little more detail, we see that almost all of them, the vast majority, have really launched and been started in this decade. Prior to 2010, there were only 6 operating programs. And between 2010 and 2013, a 4-year period, 10 new programs were launched. Then within a 2-year program, or period, 2014-2015, another 10. So there was really substantial growth in the middle of this decade. Now, while that growth has slowed down a little bit in new programs in the last few years, we are hearing lots of conversations about this in boardrooms and the senior management teams as they're doing strategic planning work and looking to the future. Today, based on information that AV and his team have gathered from their benchmarking studies, there are more than 5,000 members in the 22 programs that participated in this year's benchmarking survey. And you can see on the right-hand side there that for those organizations that have been around 10 to 20 years, the average number of active members is somewhere around 240. However, if you look at the left-hand side of this chart, you see that there's still a fairly high number of programs that have not yet reached 100 active members. So when you look at this growth in data, a couple things to share from it that have really led us to where we are with this webinar and some things that we're doing as a firm. So as I said, many organizations are really looking at whether to launch a program right now. And yet, as of 12/31/18, right at the beginning of this year, 12 of the programs that reported data to AV in his benchmarking survey this year had fewer than 100 members. Of those, 3 were programs that were launched after 12/31/15, which means 9 of those 12 programs with fewer than 100 members have been around for at least 3.5 years, and many significantly longer than that. So growth for many organizations has been a lot slower than what they may have initially expected or intended and planned around. Why? What are those factors? And in particular, what can be done? What can be learned from those success stories to help more program launches become successful in a shorter period of time? That's really what we've been focusing on, and Sarah and her parts of the webinar today are she's going to share more information on that. So I do believe we have AV live with us now. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Great, thanks. I did run through the introductory part earlier. The AV is going to start us off with highlights from his firm's 2018 benchmarking survey.
Thank you, Rob, and greetings, everyone. Let me begin by stating why we've done this benchmarking survey now for 4 years in a row. Our primary objective was to provide the industry with an overview of some macro statistics about their operations and possibly their member utilization as a guide for further research. And we'll go through some of those results in the following slides. But the idea is to give folks information that they may compare themselves so they can look for ways to improve or determine that they're operating in good stead. And of course,
This is me. This is me.
Okay.
Once we had to reboot, I forgot to give you the keyboard control again. My apologies, everyone, for that. There, but you should be good now.
Okay. All right. Let's see here. Yes, I do. All right. So what are the objectives for the benchmarking? We want to define some useful metrics for people to compare with, to identify industry-specific medians, also provide some guides in terms of utilization, what you might have in terms of whether or not you're an outlier or not, and compare with other programs. Ultimately, we want to lead to some knowledge base that provides best practices for this industry. I'd like to point out a little bit of data caveats. This is a small industry. We only surveyed active participants that have at least one continuing care at home member. Fortunately, the participation has been for the majority of the industry, over 50%, 17 out of 21, but not all survey questions are answered. So we're stretching on some items. We're trying to provide some useful information, but this is not the end all and be all because it's just not full participation yet. One of the first questions we wanted to ask was, what is the distribution of the types of contracts that might be offered? Just by way of an overview, the industry started out with mimicking CCRCs in their extensive Type A contract, where people were provided benefits over their lifetime. And then as time has moved on and the market has somewhat looked for lower fees, the industry has incorporated certain kinds of lifetime caps and also a trend for a new product that is just the home care only, where there is no institutional care involved. I'm assuming people understand the definition of a continuing care at home, but basically you're providing a set of services to folks where they're prepaying for those potentially over there for some period of time, and they either have a no copay or copay for those benefits. But the point of this slide is that there seems to be a trend that this lesser cost home care only type of product is growing slowly. Now there is one caveat to that. One provider actually represents 50% of the total members in this universe. So we look at the data sometimes with them removed, and it turns out they primarily sell a product that has a $0 membership fee, and so really fall in terms of the life care lifetime, the blue category, less than $500,000 cap. If you remove them, what we find is that the Type A or the unlimited plan or the high lifetime cap plan is still predominant in the industry, although it may be having some challenges in terms of market penetration at this stage. So the point of these two slides is that the industry has really started changing in what is going to be the prevalent contract, because we really observe that many folks are looking for that magic bullet in terms of what are the contract provisions that their particular market gravitates to and is willing to pay for the prices that they feel are actuarially adequate. As Robert's mentioned, our surveys, we asked for census counts, and we think you've broken over 5,000 members. The actual counts from folks who responded to the survey were 4,800 members, but there were several who did not. So we feel comfortable saying now you've broken the 5,000 K threshold, which is great. I mean, this industry is not that old, but certainly there's potential for room for tremendous growth. The average attained age for members in 2018 was 70. The median, this is actually the median, and so we're 78 years old, so a little bit less than the typical CCRC, and enrollment age is significantly less at 75. In fact, a provider that focuses away from the Type A contract, their enrollment age is actually age 70. So you are attracting a younger crowd, but you're still pretty much tapping into the CCRC planner type market, it appears. This slide shows the sort of size membership distribution for CCaHs. Roughly, they're a third of the size of CCRCs. The takeaway on this side is that withdrawals, once someone moves in, they're pretty much like, not moves in, enrolls. Pardon me for mixing up my terms. They're pretty much likely to say that withdrawal is very low. We look at this row that says percent new members. That is the percentage of new sales to the current base. And so it's kind of like CCRC turnover, but it's really overstated because the median size is relatively small. And so therefore 17% is a high number, but it's basically saying that you're growing fairly rapidly in some cases. Now, this is one of my favorite slides, even though I'm not a marketing or consumer research consultant as a Loving Company are. What we observed, and one of the challenges in pricing and getting the fees lower for this particular product, is that the cost to sell or close such a product might be high. Now, we took a very simple approach to say, what are the costs for your marketing department staff, your other advertising, et cetera, and divide that by the number of sales you had. So the numbers may be higher than what it may be for a mature community, but the bottom line is that for each contract sold in 2018, the average cost to sell that was $10,000. That means that $10,000 needs to be embedded in the fee structure in addition to the cost of future benefits, and that can lead to a product that may be somewhat difficult to market or somewhat high in price. 2 years ago, it was at $12,000. It dropped down, and again, these are not same store. We compare the same groups each year. It dropped down to $9,000. But you're looking at a $9,000 to $10,000 range to sell these contracts. To put this in perspective, we do a similar benchmarking survey for over 100 CCRCs each year, and their cost of sale is roughly $19,000 per contract. So that you can see selling a CCaH contract is about 50% of what it costs to sell a CCRC contract, even though the benefits in a CCRC are higher. So it's an expensive type of proposition, and one of the keys to success is finding a way to lower those costs. Also, the acceptance ratio is important. This is a product that is similar to long-term care insurance. The median ratio is 81%, and about a third of the industry uses third-party underwriters to help with their enrollment decisions. And pardon me if I switch terms. I'm used to working with CCRCs, but the term really here is enrollment. They're not moving into your CCRC. We find that the fee increases are fairly similar to what CCRCs have been doing over the last 3 years, really ranging from 2 to 3%, so fairly moderate fee increases, unlike a product that Continuing Care Home competes with, long-term care insurance, and you probably, if you survey those, find the fee increases are significantly higher, typically around the 4% or more range. These are some other statistics that are useful. One of the things is to look at the care coordinator ratios, particularly if you're planning to develop a new CCRC, in terms of how many care coordinator FTEs do you need as you grow and so forth. The median is 67 per one care coordinator FTE per 67 members. General rule of thumb was used as 60. However, the caveat I should mention is that this is influenced by the age of your CCH and the relative health of your CCH members. When a plan is relatively new and your members are relatively healthy, you can have a higher ratio as opposed to as your plan ages and you need to have more members in benefit. The bottom rows of this slide just show some of the costs that are involved in the various benefits, and the second column just indicates where these data may be somewhat biased. Again, we're not trying to say this is definitive. This is just a survey of what's out there to give people a sense of what may be reasonable for themselves if they're looking to develop a new CCaH, or if they're operating one, or their costs and so forth out of line. We limit the survey to 11 operating questions and 10 utilization questions because we want to try to maximize the response, but certainly have the ability in the future to drill down and get more extensive costs. And we certainly look for suggestions from the active participant providers to expand this survey in the future. And one thing I should mention, this survey is pretty much focused on active providers because they have hard data. But again, it's been shared with the entire both active and interested parties for CCaH. Now comes the hard part. Utilization of continuing care at home benefits is tricky and difficult to obtain. One of the goals when we first set up this survey is to try to define some metrics so that someone could look at their experience and assess whether or not they're having good or bad experience, which relates back to their original underwriting and acceptance policy. What we found was in collecting the data over the past 2 years is that while the care coordinators are providing services as gatekeepers to ensure that the members are handled appropriately, obtaining or tracking hours of data per member based on their functional status is challenging. And you may ask, why is that important? Well, it's important in terms of predicting future utilization and getting better handle on your costs and where you might be able to reduce those. My sense is that for the active CCaHs, the care coordinators are very effective in carrying out the mission of these entities and being pro-consumer. It doesn't mean that they're prescribing too much care services, but one needs to measure that because the more care services you provide, the higher your costs, and therefore the higher your premiums or fees need to be actuarially adequate. I'm not saying that fees are inadequate or that too much care is being provided. I'm saying that a best practice is for an organization to manage and monitor this and have benchmark metrics to say, well, if someone is in a functional stage where they need light help, then them having 2 hours on average per day or 20 hours per month is a reasonable range. Again, there's variation with that in that. So our point is that we hope that in the future, as folks participate in the survey, we'll get better numbers in terms of the utilization. And for example, the key here is that we looked at healthy members among the survey respondents. And by healthy, these will be people who are receiving no benefits. They're enrolled, they're not receiving any home care aid, they're not receiving adult daycare or institutional care. So for CCaHs that were less than 10 years old, 92% of their population was 100% healthy. That means 8% was receiving benefit. For the organizations that are over 10 years old that are getting toward maturity, 14%. These are not big numbers, and they're probably less than what the corresponding numbers are for a CCRC. However, within that 8% and that 14%, it's important to understand that case mix because that can drive your costs and create a situation where you're a solvent CCaH or an insolvent CCaH. And by example, a utilization metric might be using this chart. This was taken from one of the survey respondents. They had 95% of their population being healthy, which meant that there were no continuing care at home costs because they don't cost anything. There are some costs because there are some basic non-healthcare related costs such as transportation, emergency response, etc. But those are all typically done on a fee-for-service basis. Then they have folks who I'm saying at home but are not eligible for institutional care. They really are light users. That's about 1%. And basically we're receiving about 3 hours a day of care at a cost of $24. So they cost roughly about $72 a day. The next group is people at home but are really heavy users. They really would qualify for institutional care, and that's about 3% of their population. And really we're receiving about 18 hours of care per day. Now, because of their contract, they will be costing the minimum of either $300, which is a daily cap, or $432, depending on what kind of services they needed. My point is, and this is really the key driver, is that mix between the at home with light care versus at home with heavy users or possibly need institutional care, that can change over time, and that's going to financially impact the solvency of your plan and also how you set your premiums. And to date, We don't know of many organizations that can readily separate that data out to see if they're tracking according to projections and to be able to make adjustments there. And what we're suggesting is that the industry look at a universal way to sort of track this data so that one can develop the appropriate benchmarks to understand what that distribution may be over time and upon maturity. Lastly, as many folks have observed, the institutional care, assisted living, nursing care, memory care is fairly low. In this case, it's 2%, and they're at a per diem rate of an average, or it's a daily cap of $300 per day. My point here in summary is that it's important for the industry to collaborate and develop some minimum useful data. And I know it's a challenge and so forth, and it's going to take some time. We're wanting to begin to develop benchmarks on utilization and service related to that utilization by functional status to help better manage and predict and monitor their experience to develop best practices. In wrap up here, we will be presenting this information in a week or two to a one-day forum for active CCaH providers in Pennsylvania, and we'll ask them, do they feel that it's worthwhile, how we can get from 50% participation to 80% or more, and in particular, help discuss challenges regarding the survey data, and more importantly, try to push the interest, develop a collaborative approach where we might be able to collect more utilization data to help the industry better benchmark. I think on the operational side, we've got a good set of information. There may be some drill down, but certainly we're looking for ways to improve the 2019 survey, because I think it's important for all of those interested in this industry and participating in it to have quantifiable data to help make decisions. And that is the wrap up for our benchmarking components.
Great, thank you, AV. So now we're going to switch direction a little bit and talk a little bit about some of the information Loving Company has pulled together this past year, looking a little more detail at the sales and marketing side. Some of our objectives in undertaking this is, just as AV was saying, it's really important to establish benchmarks so that programs can really begin to evaluate, are we doing well, where are our opportunities for improvement, and just overall guide themselves to better performance. So that's really what we're trying to do here. Sarah's going to walk us through what we've been doing and what we've learned so far.
Thank you, Rob. So we had 9 programs participate, which is 29% of active programs. With having such a small number of CCaH programs, we would love to, if any more programs were interested, so we are willing to reopen that window. And one of the things that you'll find as I start going through the numbers here is because we have such a small number of participants, we're reporting on both medians and averages along with the range of overall responses. We feel this will give communities the most information as we begin to build out these benchmarks to really see how they compare to other programs. So the median number of members for each program is 166, and you'll see that that's very close to the average. But you'll also notice that this is actually higher than the median number of members for all programs, which was 89. So we had more of the larger programs participate in our research. And you'll see in terms of the median number year open, it's 2013, with 6 who opened between 2011 and 2016. And going back to Rob's earlier slide, you'll see that that really falls in line with when there was a significant number of programs that came online. For new leads per year, one of the key differences in how leads are recorded when compared to life plan communities is that CCaH programs report each member of a household as a lead. And the reason being is that each member of a couple represents a potential member for the program, whereas for a life plan community, the couples would be moving into a residence as a single unit. This is a statistic that's actually influenced by two programs that had a higher number of leads with over 900 and one quite high at nearly 1,800. So that really pulled up our average to 600, whereas the median is 360. So that programs are able to look at these numbers in terms of benchmarking what is a reasonable number of leads to acquire and to see how they fall within that range. In terms of cost per lead, our median at $309 per lead is actually in line with what Love & Company sees with operating life plan communities at $321. However, this is something that is influenced by that difference between looking at leads on an individual level versus household. So when you account for the per household acquisition cost, since those leads are acquired at the same time, that does increase the median, and this is something that programs need to keep in mind when they're budgeting for their lead generation costs. Information seminars are the key driver of new leads and also the primary event type. And when you compare this to a typical life plan community and see that the average number of seminars is 47 per year, that really translates to programs having about one event per week. The two key differences between what is done for continuing care at home programs compared to life plans communities is that initial lead generation event are typically much smaller in size, with between 7 and 13 leads. Additionally, more event dates are advertised in a single direct mail piece. So you may have one direct mail piece that's covering what your information seminars are for the next 2 months, and that also impacts budgeting for lead generation. The overall sales cycle averages 7 months for all programs, and most fall within the 4 to 10 month range. This is something that we thought was really important to look at the differences between the older and newer programs to see if that was influencing the numbers at all, and they were both very consistently at an average about 7 months and a median for 6 months. In terms of applications, most programs have about 24 new members per year, whereas applications are slightly higher at 35. It was interesting to see that the majority of the programs in the survey saw an increase in both new members and applications in 2017 when compared to 2016, and then saw those actually slide back to below 2016 levels in 2018. Now, we don't know if this relates to a difference in the marketing programs or different things in the economy or political that has caused this decrease in new members and applications, but it is something to keep an eye on and looking at what can be done to increase the number of new members and applications. And even more important than just the number of leads and people attending the information seminar is what's actually happening. Are those leads translating into appointments, and then what is resulting from them? In terms of conversion rate, the overall conversion from leads to appointments is moderate. The average is 29%, which is fine, but that median at 21% is close to 10% below where it would be for a life plan community. Now, the conversion rate for total appointments to applications is slightly stronger and more in line with where we'd expect it to be. However, when you look at total number of appointments, it breaks down to about 12 appointments per month or 3 per week. Really increasing the number of appointments is going to be a key driver in increasing the number of applications and members. So it's looking at what can be done to increase the conversion rate from new leads to total appointments, or increasing the total number of new leads to really drive up the appointments. The greatest challenges for programs, they're really in 2 areas. They're either more marketing focused, with being commonly mistaken for home care, that when people see advertisements or receive the direct mail, they're not really sure what the program is. They think they're selling to somebody to come out, whether it's medical or non-medical home care. And then it relates to not understanding that these programs are meant to sign up for when you're healthy and you don't have any health needs. In terms of the other 2 are more sales related, are things about putting a plan in place for your future, or not understanding what the high cost is for private pay long-term care, and really understanding how this program can serve as a protection from those high costs. And as I mentioned earlier, we would love to increase the number of participants. So if you're a continuing care at home program that are listening now but did not participate in our benchmarking survey, please reach out to me. If you're interested, we'd love to have your numbers added to our data set. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So to those of you out there that are thinking of putting together a program, or maybe actually in the process of planning it right now, I think the information Sarah just walked through can be really important to you in terms of helping plan the marketing budget. Specifically, if you look at the number of sales you expect to make in a year, well, that translates to how many appointments you need to have using these conversion rates. And how many appointments you have translates to, how many leads you're going to need to generate, again, based on these conversion rates. And how many leads you generate and the average cost per lead tells you how much you have to invest in the lead generation portion of the whole marketing program. So those numbers can be very valuable to both existing and new organizations, and figure out if we want to grow at a more aggressive rate, what kind of investment do we need to make? Or, as Sarah suggested, how do you focus in on certain parts of the program and try and increase those conversion rates as another way to drive sales? So very helpful. Thank you very much. So the next part, and we're going to hand it back to Sarah in a minute again. The second part of what we've been working on this year, in addition to collecting data to try and establish those benchmarks, has been to reach out to consumers and find out what are they, why are members choosing to move, not to move, I did what you did, maybe, try to join, why are they deciding to join a program? And then more importantly, for those people who are not joining, what are the primary reasons that they are not? And how can we learn from that and again, apply what we learn to improve our marketing programs? So the first part that Sarah's going to walk through is what we've learned from members. And we're continuing to focus research on the non-member side. Sarah, back to you.
Okay. So in terms of methodology, this research was really exciting because we got to use a new research tool, which is conducted completely online with separate sessions held for members that we've already held and for new leads, that were really discussion groups that allowed us to blend elements of survey and focus group research. This was a great opportunity since we were able to have members of different programs participate in the same research sessions and respond and interact with each other. Some questions had a list of specific responses, while others were open-ended, where participants answered in their own words. Then for those open-ended questions, participants that voted on other members' responses so that we were able to see where there was consensus between the members, both within the same programs and of different programs, with why they responded the way they did and really come up with a prioritized ranking of answers. We're really great to have the opportunity to hear from members and later lead in their own words how they felt about the program. These sessions were held in mid-July, and we had 34 members participate from 5 different programs. As Rob mentioned, the non-member research is in progress, and we'll have those results to share at Leading Age. Okay. In terms of member demographics, the members tend to be slightly younger, more likely to be married, and more affluent than what we see for a typical life plan community resident. This aligns with what AV saw in his survey with communities reporting in on the average age of the members. One of the things that we found really interesting was the high percentage of members who also reported having long-term care insurance for either themselves or a spouse at 71%. And this is higher than what we typically see for a life plan community resident. One of the key things that has come up in discussing sales and marketing activities for programs or sponsors who are considering developing a program is what should that role of the sponsoring organization be? How close should the connection be between the sponsoring community and the program? And it's come up in this and in our experience with other programs is that role of the sponsor really is critical, that it's really that reputation of the sponsor that lends the credibility to the program. However, the program shouldn't really be considered a feeder source for the community, since only a small percentage of the members are likely to later to move to the community. That this really allows you to broaden your market. A discussion point that we've had with organizations is in launching a continuing care at home program, is this going to take away from those who would consider moving into the community? That it's really a distinct market from your life plan community resident, since they're really looking at ways to stay at home and can really allow a sponsor to broaden who they're serving, both in terms of the people that wouldn't move to their community and also broaden the area of which they serve, since a continuing care at home program typically serves a larger market area than a life plan community typically does.
So Sarah, I think you touched on something that's really important there for both existing providers and anybody who's thinking about this to be considering. And that's that the typical life plan community may have a primary market area that is only, it's relatively close to the community. The majority of people tend to move 5 to 10 miles. However, as you just said, the defined market area, service area for a continuing care at home product is significantly larger, often running up to 20 miles or more. So a dynamic that comes into play here that may be affecting some programs is that the programs may have a strong brand awareness just within those closer geographical areas and not have a strong brand awareness. And so when they reach out and market to that broader service area, the market doesn't understand it as much. The point being, organizations may need to do more brand development work and marketing in that broader geographic area to create that credibility for the sponsorship.
That's a really great point. Thank you, Rob. The other thing that's come up with programs is how closely to tie into the name of their sponsoring community and have those marketing efforts related, whereas some really want to keep a line between the two, that the more you're able to show the credibility of the sponsor for a new program, both within your local market and for the community, and as you go beyond it, can really help lend to the credibility of your program that this isn't a brand new entity entering the market. And that really ties into what the biggest concern is about joining the program. It really relates to the survivability of the program. Will it remain financially strong? So the more a community can do to lend the credibility and financial strength of the community in support of the program can really go a long way to address concerns of leads. Another is having this sufficient number and high quality service provider that the program is really able to source who members need when they need them. Cost is always a big concern in terms of affordability. People want to make sure that they're going to be able to continue to afford the community. And then, does the program truly provide enough care to let them safely age in place? In terms of the most valuable part about being a member, when I read these three, in a lot of ways, they're all coming back to the same thing, that care coordinator who's providing them their point of contact is also their person that they know who help is available. And because they have that person, it gives them that peace of mind and freedom from worry. That's such a vital role in developing a strong continuing care at home program, is having those care coordinators who are able to develop strong relationships with members so that they're able to trust that they'll be there when they need them. In terms of what somebody would tell a friend, overall these responses were very positive and things that can be turned into some talking points for sales and marketing materials. One thing programs do a great job of is incorporating testimonials. And one way that they could do that is really ask different members to share exactly what they would tell a friend. But the big thing is they would tell their friends to go get more information. The program really gives them a way to control expenses and vet, arrange, and supervise and pay for it directly. That it really covers key aspects of what someone needs more so than what you would get with a long-term care insurance policy. The full findings will be in the 2019 Love Report, which we'll have shortly before the Fall Leading Age Conference in San Diego. Thank you, Rob.
Okay, and thank you, Sarah. So our final part here today is particularly relevant, I think, to those of you who may be thinking about developing a program. You've talked about it, you're aware of it, and so forth. But how do you go about that? And AV is going to walk us through the steps in developing a program, from the initial thought process and getting it started to when you would be able to take your first check. So AV, over to you again.
Thank you, Rob. Let me begin by stating what I hope you will take away from this session. One is having an understanding of the potential timeline from all of wanting to do a CCaH to selling your first contract, and also to alert you to some of the key risks and decision points along the way. To simplify matters, we have developed a 5-step or 5-phase outline, of which there could be many sub-phases within each one. First phase being board approval and obtaining the legislative authority if it's not already available in your state. Second step is consumer or market research and your initial product design. third step is taking that information and doing an actuarial financial feasibility to ensure that the fees you're charging are going to be adequate to deliver your contract. And then the fourth stage, which is referred to as iterative market research, redesign, and pricing, is revamping and tweaking your initial thoughts about your product design in light of the pricing analysis to create a product that you feel will be successful in your marketplace. And then lastly, if everything goes well, selling your first continuing care at home contract. Let's talk about this first step, board approval and legislative authority. Obviously, this cannot start without your board saying we're interested in exploring the CCaH and giving you authority to do what needs to be done. Currently, there are more than 20 states that allow continuing care contracts to be sold, and all of them are under CCRC regulatory provisions. This is an advantage because your product is very similar to a long-term care insurance product, and by being allowed to offer the contract under CCRC regulatory provisions, it becomes much more feasible to do so because you don't have the same insurance type regulations and capital reserves that a long-term care product would have. I do mention two states that pose challenges. California is listed because you're not allowed to sell them as of yet, I believe, although I think they're exploring that. And not to pick on Florida or New York, they do allow the sale of continuing care at home contracts. However, they limit the number of contracts any one CCRC can sell. And you may ask, well, why do I indicate that's a development challenge? We'll discuss later that from an actuarial risk viewpoint, the more continuing care contracts you can sell, the lower the risk. So that when you're limited in the number of contracts, not only are you not able to minimize your actuarial risk of the contract since you're offering a healthcare guarantee, also you're limited in terms of spreading out and reducing your overhead costs among a larger number of folks. But that doesn't mean that you can't offer that product in those states. And in fact, there is one active CCaH in Florida. Next step, market, and I really should say consumer research and product design. This is really the heart of trying to develop a successful continuing care at home product. And you may recall I mentioned earlier, finding that magic bullet in terms of what your potential consumer will want and pricing at a level that they find value in it. To me, this is the first step for anyone considering a continuing care at home product. It is the understanding that consumer and consumer research, as Love & Company has discussed, in terms of finding out what product makes sense to them and where are their price points. Once that's determined, there's a limited number of actuarial tools in terms of product design to try to help you get to that price point. No guarantee that you will, because at the end of the day, one has to cover your costs, and your actuarial liabilities. But understanding and designing a product, doing as much research up front to design a product that you think meets consumer needs will save you money in your feasibility efforts down the road. We've observed over the past 20 years several different variations of continuing care contracts and some similar contracts. The initial one, or the traditional, is a continuing care contract with a significant membership fee, $40,000 or more, and it has an advantage that some folks want to pre-fund. And years ago, when it was first developed, it was fairly popular, and typically these fees are deductible. More recently, we're seeing continuing care at home products with a 0% membership fee or home care only to respond to the fact that the market is resisting paying dollars up front and wants to look at lower fees in trade-off for lesser benefits. A couple of options that were developed about 10 years ago that have proven to be very successful. Early admission was developed by CCRC, and I apologize, actually the Life Plan community in North Carolina that wanted to target their waiting list, and they have over 100 members, and at least 5 or 6 other organizations have mimicked that type of product. And in essence, it's a product that strips out the independent living component of the Life Plan community and allows folks to sort of buy into the potential health care while they're on the waiting list. And it works because typically these waiting lists are 8 to 10 years or longer. Another group in Ohio developed a similar product known as free residency life care, and it's targeted to their waiting list again. But after age 75, a person either has to move in or be removed from the program. And lastly, we've seen a couple of recent developments where the same concept and benefits that are included in a continuing care and home plan are offered an a la carte or fee-for-service option, and they really offer the least financial risk to the provider. But deciding on your theme and understanding what your market wants is the first and most critical step in a successful program launch. Now, in terms of contract design, as actuaries, we have many tools that we can help price out for you. I'll just run through this list, and you can use any of all these in planning your design. And at the end of my presentation, I'll give an illustration of how some of these might impact premiums. COLA refers to cost of living adjustment. Pretty much everyone includes an inflation adjustment on fees over time, but you could make it a flat benefit. Having refunds or credit for someone moving into your life plan community after they had their continuing care at home plan, as Sarah mentioned, that is not the typical plan, but a typical option that people move in, but certainly you can provide credits for that. You can put a lifetime benefit cap to control your maximum exposure to dollars, and that's something that's become pretty prevalent as opposed to the unlimited benefit caps that were historically offered. A daily benefit cap. You could include an elimination period, which is somewhat rare, a deductible period where there's no benefit, and then it starts after, say, 1 year or so. Many plans offer benefit copay, give people options of plans that lower premiums, waiver of premium when someone is in benefit, coordination with a long-term care insurance policy, and sharing and who may pay that, as well as portability of the plan if someone wants to move to another state. So there are many different ways actuarially one can price and develop a plan that might reduce your fees and costs. I've seemed to lost mouse control for some reason. Let me see if we get that back. Pardon me. Okay, here we go. Now, what I mentioned previously was ways to adjust your plan design so that you can include or exclude certain benefits. This slide shows the different kinds of benefits that might be included in your plan, and they vary by the amount of the copay. On the left-hand side, we have a laundry list of different healthcare benefits that the gatekeeper would assign based on their assessment of your member. And on the right-hand side are supportive benefits that are generally offered as 100% copay, but basically allow support to help keep that member at home, such as emergency response, home inspections, lighthouse work, etc. These are a checklist that you can decide to include in your plan or not. You can vary the copay, and this will give you different premium structures to meet what you think your consumer is looking for. So on the one hand, while continuing care at home seems simpler than a life plan community contract, when it comes to pricing it, it is infinitely more complex because there are many more options that are involved. Now the third step, getting to the actuarial financial feasibility. And please be assured, one, we are proponents of continuing care at home. We think there's a great plan. Two, I'm not trying to say that actuarial is the only way to evaluate this, but your product is in essence a long-term care insurance product, so that you're making promises to folks over time and collecting dollars in payment for those promises prior to they have utilization. That is uniquely an actuarial mathematical problem, and so it can be solved in that manner. And so I strongly suggest that when you're looking at trying to measure your solvency and so forth, that you look at an actuarial analysis to develop actuarially sound fees to feed to your market researchers or consumer researchers to see if they value those fees in light of the plan benefits. What are the key assumptions in developing your plan? Well, one is what I'm referring to as overhead for administrative and marketing. Those are somewhat fixed costs. And there's at the end here, I'm going to talk about a stabilization enrollment target. These costs are pretty much the same whether you have 1 member, 10 member, 200 members, or 1,000 members. And there's a little trick here I'm going to mention in a minute why this is very critical for you in terms of those costs. Care coordinating staffing ratios, we've seen a slide earlier that shows what the median may be, so you want to make sure that as you're adding care coordinators, you get the right mix, and you might even have to initially do care coordinators on a independent consultant basis until you get to a certain level where you can hire full-time FTE. Then last third are the actual benefit unit costs for a CNA per hour, home health aide per hour, nursing care, and so forth. Those are fairly straightforward. The numbers that are harder to get are the actual utilization for longevity and use of the benefits, and what I'm referring to is this stabilization target reserve target. And what that means is at what point will your plan be stabilized, although you probably plan to go it forever. But why is this important? It's important because in spreading those overhead costs, we have to make an assumption how many people that's going to be spread over. Typically, one may say we're going to grow to 300 people, and therefore we'll spread our initial administrative marketing costs over 300 folks. And what that means is that when you have an average of 10 folks in that first year, you're subsidizing those administrative marketing costs because your fee structure doesn't include the cost divided by 10 persons. It has the cost divided by 300 people. That's okay, and that's what most organizations do, and we'll talk about how you might handle that. But certainly, this is a sort of a startup loss risk that may be hidden that one has to consider as you're starting out planning your program. And in fact, I want to go through several slides here fairly quickly to talk about some of the subtleties of actuarial solvency. Now, I'm making the assumption that you want to design a plan that says, here are our benefits, here are our co-pay provisions, here are our capitations, et cetera. So this represents a certain liability. And to cover that liability, we want to charge an upfront membership fee as well as a monthly fee such that over the life of this member, those fees will cover their costs plus some reserve for contingencies or surplus. So I'm assuming that's the way you want to price your program, and that is the way that we suggest doing it. Well, first, let's talk about each one of these in the following slides. Let me go back. All right. In terms of size and that stabilization number, the larger number of members you have enrolled, the lower your actuarial risk. And so therefore, if you have a plan that you can grow to 300 members, you need a smaller actuarial margin for contingency risk than one that has 100 members. An alternative, you can increase it to 1,000 members, that risk it becomes even smaller. Also, it has the impact of reducing your overhead costs and therefore allowing you to charge lower premiums. We can demonstrate this, although I'm not doing it in this slide. The point of this slide is that that's why in a state where you limit the number of contracts sold, you limit or hamper the ability for a continuing care at home to offer a cost-effective product because of that limitation. And so that makes it challenging. Doesn't mean it can't be done in those states, it just makes it a little bit harder to do. This slide talks about what I refer to as stabilization enrollment assumption, that 300 number or 200 number or what have you. What's the point that I'm trying to make here? We talk with many organizations, and I think the key item, and we've talked with some that have decided to, who are offering their programs and decided to end it, managing your board's expectations up front about the cash flows and when your continuing care at home organization will achieve actuarial solvency or 100% plus funding status is very important. I would suggest that using GAAP pro forma financial statements is not appropriate. It's not an appropriate measure to understand the success of your program. I feel confident in saying that the way membership fees are earned, even with the new audit guide, is too quick and therefore overstates the financial condition of your at-home program. One really has to look at long-term cash flows and the actuarial evaluation to make this assessment. And with this stabilization issue, that while it may take you 10 years or more to get to your 200, 300 level, as we've seen, it took some organizations as long as 20 years to get to up to 300 people. And those you're not going to typically price your product where the costs in the early years are fully covered by the average number of members those years. I think you could try it, but your price will just not be sellable. So you're going to have those losses hidden in or embedded in your operations. You can fund those from future surpluses, or you can fund them from seed money provided by your parent organization. But my point is that it's going to typically take many years, probably more than 10 years, before your Contrarian Care at Home plan is solvent. Doesn't mean that you won't have positive cash flows during the period. In fact, you very well will, especially if you're charging an upfront membership program. But to become fully solvent is a process that takes time, and one should just be aware of that, so that when you're not at that stage that you think this plan is not working. But again, it all boils down to how quickly and how rapidly you can sell and enroll new members. This slide just shows one point I want to make very quickly, is that the relationship between your fees and your margins may not be smooth because utilization doesn't follow exactly those patterns. So you may decide to develop a fee structure that says, I'm going to increase membership fees by 3% for each age. I'll keep monthly fees constant. And you may have varying margins by the various ages, but that's okay. At the end of the day, that last column, last row in this chart, that as long as your overall weighted average margin is sound, it really doesn't matter what the individual margins are. Then secondly, on this slide, we can derive any, but mathematically, from an actuarial report, we can provide any relationship that you want in terms of the entry fee and monthly fee structure among different contract types. Bottom line on this slide, look at the average weighted average margin and understand that you may not have a really neat kind of formula that gives you the same margin for each and every entry age, sale, and contract type. This slide, in terms of short-term projections, this is the cash flow projection, goes to my point that looking at your GAAP performance or just looking at cash flows for a short period of time can be misleading. What we've done is taken 3 pricing structures, one that was 100% funded, one that was 95% funded, and one that was 90% funded. What the slide shows is that even after 12 years, a 90% funded program will still have a positive cash balance, although it may be beginning to decline around the 12th year or so. And so if one looked at just 12 years, they think that is fine, but ultimately it's going to run out of money. One that was 90% funded may just level out, but the true solvent program should have ever-increasing cash flow projections and accumulate significant reserves if you're using a membership-free plan, because those reserves represent the difference between future costs of care and what the monthly fees and co-pays the member is paying. Part of this slide is that one needs to look toward long-term projections and also achieving 100% funding status to really understand that your plan is sound and not just on the GAAP the GAAP projections and the fact you have positive cash. That doesn't mean necessarily you have a sound plan. Step 4, iterative market research, redesign, and repricing. What do we mean by that? Well, as I mentioned back on slide 61, which I'm going to bounce to right quick, there are many different design parameters that one can incorporate in your fee structure. We can change those to help you get to a fee structure that meets your consumer's desires. This is just an illustration where we compared an unlimited plan and project out future costs by survivorship to a plan that had a $250,000 lifetime cap. In this case, we did everything all in monthly fees, so the unlimited plan monthly fee was $931, whereas the $250,000 cap monthly fee was $711 per month. And the difference between the two lines are the expected costs, where the orange line just shows the capitation and the limit on the benefits. In other words, the person is now using their $250. Part of this is that many different pricing schedules can develop by changing the different plan provisions, as is shown in this following table. And I'm not trying to inundate you with different tables, but as actuaries, we can certainly price out many different options and limited number of options for you. In this example, we're doing the traditional no copay, put in a 7-year daily limit, a 20% copay, a 50% copay, a home care only plan, and a 1-year elimination. The point of this slide is there are 3 factors here: your plan design, your monthly fee, and your entry fee. Choose 2, and we can derive the second. For example, in the second column, if you have a 100% monthly fee and no copay or 0% copay, the derived membership fee needs to be $43,465. However, if you go to a 50% copay when someone is in benefit, that derived membership fee goes to $14,350. If you went to a home care only plan, where when someone was it covered basic limited home care services, it drops down to almost a 0 membership fee. These relationships will vary depending on your plan and your cost, but the point of this slide is that there's an unlimited number of variations or pricing options that can be done to meet your consumer demands. And wrapping up, closing your first contract. That phase 4 can take some time. It's a lot of back and forth in terms of figuring out the right contract mix, but ultimately you will get to the point of where you will be able to sell your first contract. And what we're observing is that some folks go immediately to the market, others defer their official launch until they get a pre-sale threshold, such as 75 contracts or so, which is a good idea because it helps you minimize your startup stabilization losses. But either approach is valid. To give you a sense of the timing, we talked with several clients. I don't think anyone's really done it within 20 months, but starting in month 0, it may take 12 to 20 months for your initial market research and design, then 2 to 4 months for the initial actuarial feasibility, maybe shorter than that. But this iterative process can take several months, and there may be several go, no-go decisions during this process, but hopefully somewhere between 20 to 30 months, you'll be able to sell your first contract from the date when you first got board approval to go ahead. And in summary, these are just anecdotal recommendations. Because the product is a relatively, I don't want to say high, moderate risk actuarial program, you want to make sure that you include appropriate contingency margins to the extent that the consumer will bear them. You want to make sure you set up utilization and cost monitoring systems and benchmarks so that you can track, even from the very beginning, how you're doing versus what the anticipated performance were. And given the uncertainties, it may be that starting out with a lower risk program, one with lesser benefits, might be appropriate as you gain more experience. So with that, I will stop and turn over for questions and answers, I believe.
Great, thank you, AP. That's an awesome overview for people that are thinking about what may be involved here. So we're fortunate we've had a number of people submit questions so far. Okay, here we go. Oh, there's always the question of, will we be sharing this presentation with you? And I forgot to say that. I usually say at the very beginning, yes, we will. At the end of this has actually all been recorded, and we will distribute to everyone who registered, not just those of you who were able to join us today, but we will distribute a copy of the full recorded presentation to all of you. And see, do you think that the low number of continuing care at home programs is due to the high level of regulations in many states like Florida? AD, can you tackle that one? There's a low number of CCaH programs due to high level of regulations.
I don't believe, other than being the first CCaH in your state, most of them are regulated under the life regulations. And I don't believe that is really the impediment. The challenge is that the market is not necessarily in sync with what the product is. 20 years ago, the first CCaH, which is now the largest, grew fairly substantially. And also long-term care insurance is pretty prevalent. But now with folks, long-term care insurance on the decline, folks seem to be resistant to paying for the membership fee type of plan, so growth is fairly slow. I think it's just that the consumer, while they value it, they just aren't willing to pay for it at this point.
All right, thank you. Next question, so on the market study side, have you calculated a penetration rate for the continuing care at home markets being served? So I'm interpreting that as, what proportion of the age and income qualified people in each market area are actively being served. And obviously that's something that's pretty easy to calculate, but it's not something we've looked at in the benchmark so far, primarily because so many of the programs still have such a small, they've been growing, they have not yet reached stabilization in terms of a stabilized market penetration rate. So we don't really have numbers to share, and they are going to vary significantly by programs. There's programs that may have 35 members so far in a market that has 5,000 age and income qualified households. It's a minuscule penetration rate, but we are working to gather more of that. I had another thought on that and it just escaped me. But on the penetration rates, I'm sorry, but that's the primary answer. For Sarah, very interesting stats and methods. Does the voting on other respondents' answers create consensus bias?
Great question. It can certainly influence how they are responding. So yes, there could be some consensus bias. That said, the other participants are only able to see what the top two responses are where there's consensus. And during the sessions, we're able to see that that's changing during the voting period, so it doesn't appear to have a significant impact. We're also able to look at what the like answer choices were initially to see where consensus was before the voting began.
Okay, thanks. Adi, question for you. I have an existing CCaH program. Can we share the program revenues, costs, and program details with you, AV, to help us evaluate the long-term feasibility of the program as it exists today?
The answer is that should one, by updating their financial information and census information, can they get updated actuarial projections to see where they are? The answer is yes, and that's something that we recommend folks do on a regular, even annual basis in terms of setting their fees and making sure they're headed in the right direction for solvency.
So should whoever that person asked the question just reach out to you directly?
Yes, they can.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. Marketing related question. Please comment on your opinion of how important or not it is to capitalize on being a new offering and the only program in a particular market. I'm not sure about the exact number here, but of the 31 programs, most are the only program in the market by definition, which honestly, in my opinion, is a little bit more of a challenge than it is a benefit, simply because we have a consumer base that does not yet really understand what this product is. In fact, even what we're calling it here today, and they're sort of adopting as a term for it as a field, continuing care at home, is not a term that means anything to consumers anywhere. So a question I have, I'm going to answer a question with a question, but it's something I think we as a field need to address, is there a benefit in creating a stronger, consistent brand named for what this type of program is, and having that brand be something that's available to support individual programs as they launch? So there's always a benefit to being new, in response to your question. In this case, being the only, there's certainly nothing wrong with communicating that because it's true in almost every case. It's just more, it raises the bar for how important the educational part of the whole marketing program is as to what this product is. Next question. What plan options or discounts are available for those with existing long-term care insurance policies so that it makes financial sense to the consumer? And Avi, I'll take a first shot at this, but it's probably even more so in your wheelhouse. But I think what Avi was trying to share with some of the slides earlier, that there's so many variations of possibilities that can be explored in programs with the amount of deductible that you may have, in particular, say before the continuing care at home program would kick in. You can set that deductible so that it meets the majority of what long-term care insurance programs offer. And therefore, the two programs can work together very well to support each other. So there are almost any number of ways you could structure a program to be favorable to long-term care insurance. Avi, do you want to add more to that?
Yes, Rob, I think you're right on target there. And we've worked with folks trying to figure out how to coordinate with long-term care insurance benefits and even include coordination in their contract terms in terms of who pays first and so forth. My only caveat there is that long-term care insurance companies are very savvy, so it may be challenging to get them to contribute to your plan, but by you excluding deductibles, et cetera, we should be able to mimic or wrap around existing policies. But it is a challenge, but something that can be worked through.
All right. The next one, I'm not sure it's really so much a question as much as it is an observation that was shared, which I think makes some sense. It says, looks like the continuing care at home survey process captures fretful worriers similar to the psychographic, the PRISM psychographic of those that purchase long-term care insurance, which is less than 20% of the population. I think that makes a lot of sense, especially considering that, as Sarah said, those that participate in our research, 71% of those who are members of programs, of those participants who are members of programs, also have long-term care insurance. Are there software platforms in production specifically for CCaH programs? Now, I'm assuming that that question means something similar to AOD or point-click care that has various facets tailored to unique things related to continuing care at home. And to be honest, I'm not aware of any specific modules or adaptations being done for that yet. Most of the programs that we're aware of are using basically the same software that they use for the rest of the community, either for the accounting side or for the marketing, management as a CRM tool. And that was the end of our questions, and we are at 1:27, so just a couple minutes ahead of time. So again, I really would like to thank everybody for joining us today. In particular, I'd like to thank Avi for joining us in this webinar today. We're really looking forward to learning more from him and others at the Continuing Care at Home Forum later in this month. Sarah, thank you again for your time. Thank you to another Sarah that most of you don't even know, but who's been sitting here managing this and responding to the technological issues for us today, Sarah Gray. So thank you for all your help in making this happen. And again, thanks to all the participants. We hope this has been helpful to you. And in the next couple of days, we will get something out to all of you that has a link to the recording. So with that, we'll be signing off.